Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Today, we're pulling back the curtain a bit on a story. It might seem kind of distant, a political thing happening miles away, but it actually has these immediate, very personal impacts. Surprising ones, really. Rippling across oceans, maybe even affecting your morning coffee. We're getting into the surprising and frankly pretty impactful story of former President Donald Trump's recent announcement. A huge 50% tariff on Brazilian imported goods. And look, this isn't just some dry economic policy tweak, no way. It's more like a political thunderbolt, really designed to shake things up globally, but the most direct hit. It seems to be landing squarely on the small coffee producers in Brazil. So our mission today is to take you on a bit of a journey through the sources we've looked at. We'll go from, the halls of power in D.C. right down to the sun-drenched coffee plantations in Brazil, places that are suddenly feeling very vulnerable. We want to extract the most crucial nuggets of insight, try and understand the layers here, from the big geopolitical chessboard moves right down to the anxious, sleepless nights of individual farmers.
It's a look at how these big political decisions can just brutally transform lives. So yeah, get ready. We're going to uncover some compelling human stories, look at the economic ripple effects, which are pretty far-reaching, and also touch on the, let's say, unexpected political motives behind it all. Okay, let's start peeling back the layers on this one. We're about to explore how a single policy decision can hit right there in your morning cup, affecting lives thousands of miles away in ways you probably never imagined. Right, so let's kick things off with the actual news, the thing that really sent shockwaves. It was early July 2025, or maybe just slightly before then. Former President Donald Trump, who, let's be honest, has a history of using aggressive trade tactics. He drops this bombshell, a massive 50% tariff on Brazilian imported goods coming into the United States. Just pause on that for a second. 50%? That's not a small adjustment. It's not a gentle nudge.
No, it's colossal.
It's a huge economic wall, basically. A 50% tax on, everything from Brazilian coffee to beef, orange juice, you name it, trying to enter the U.S. market. It was a move that, understandably, sent immediate shockwaves across the Atlantic. But here's where it gets really interesting, where it shifts from just economics into, serious international political games. Because this wasn't framed as an economic move, was it? Not about trade deficits or protecting U.S. jobs? Not really.
Not overtly, no. The justification was quite different.
Exactly. Trump made it incredibly, undeniably political. In a public letter that came out with the announcement, he spelled it out. He said this tariff was directly linked to the trial happening in Brazil involving his ally, former President Jair Bolsonaro. He didn't really mince words either. He called Bolsonaro's trial a witch hunt. Straight up.
Yeah.
It's just kind of astonishing, isn't it? Using a massive economic sanction as a tool for international political interference, with huge economic consequences hanging in the balance.
It truly is astonishing. And what's fascinating, but also, frankly, deeply concerning, is what this signals. We're seeing economic policy being weaponized, not for, traditional geopolitical strategy or market correction or even national security arguments, but for direct interference in another sovereign nation's judicial process.
Like the courts.
Exactly. It kind of shatters the usual idea that trade is this separate sphere. It creates this new, and I'd say pretty dangerous form of international pressure. I mean, historically, tariffs are tools for trade disputes, right? Maybe you're pushing for fairer market access or responding to dumping practices.
Standard trade stuff.
Standard trade stuff, exactly. But tying it directly to an internal criminal trial, that's something else. And in this case, it's the trial of former President Bolsonaro, who is accused of masterminding a coup attempt after he lost the 2022 election to the current president, Lula da Silva.
A very serious charge.
Extremely serious. So this tariff becomes a direct economic intervention aimed at influencing a legal outcome in another country. That sets a highly volatile, really unpredictable precedent for future international relations. It makes you wonder, what lines are we okay with global powers crossing in the name of political alliances? Where does it stop?
Yeah, it really feels like opening Pandora's box, doesn't it? The sheer boldness of making that link so explicit is, it's remarkable. And while we could sit here and dissect the big geopolitical chess moves all day, the immediate impact, the real raw impact of this political theater, it's felt most sharply by people who are miles away from those decisions.
Absolutely. The human cost.
It's exactly. When you hear stories like Jose's this farmer we'll talk about who's literally losing sleep over this, or Paulo, another farmer who's got a baby on the way. It just hits home so hard. It stops being abstract numbers on a spreadsheet and becomes about people's actual lives, their livelihoods, their basic sense of security just being thrown into chaos. And that's really what we need to focus on next. the immediate, undeniable human cost of this tariff policy. So the moment this 50% tariff got announced, it wasn't just a headline. It sent this chilling wave of fear and uncertainty rippling through Brazil, especially among the thousands and thousands of small coffee producers. We're talking about specific areas, beautiful places actually, like Varese and Porciúncula, which are in Rio de Janeiro state. Places where coffee isn't just a crop, it's the whole way of life. It's heritage.
It's everything for those communities.
Right. And the experts on the ground, they immediately saw it coming. They predicted a drastic drop in coffee prices right there in Brazil. This was even before the tariff officially kicked in. The market just reacts to fear, doesn't it?
It does. Fear and uncertainty are powerful market movers.
And the fear was definitely palpable. To make this real, let's paint a picture. Let's talk about José Natal da Silva. He's a small-scale coffee producer from Porciúncula, a man whose hands, you can just imagine, tell the story of a life spent working the land. He started in the fields when he was just 12 years old. Think about that.
Since childhood.
Yeah, his whole identity is wrapped up in these coffee plants. He owns about 40,000 coffee trees. So his life, his family's future, it's all tied up in these plants. And since this tariff news broke, Jose describes feeling, with this sort of weary honesty, increased anxiety and troubled sleep. Just this constant knot of dread, worrying he's going to lose everything he spent decades building. Imagine hearing him say this, standing right there on his farm, the sun beating down, his voice probably heavy with worry. He said, "We're sad because we struggle so much. We spend years battling to get somewhere, and suddenly everything starts falling apart, and we're going to lose everything. How are we going to survive?"
It's heartbreaking. Just a raw plea.
It really is. It's a gut-wrenching question. There were photos taken around July 17th, 2025, of Jose and his wife, Fernanda Marsola. They're out there under the hot sun, faces etched with concern, harvesting and sifting coffee beans on their farm. You can almost feel the physical labor, the back-breaking work, all for a living that now feels so incredibly precarious. And this struggle, it isn't new for them. Jose already had diversified his farm before this. He grows other things, cassava, squash, bananas, oranges, lemons. He even raises chickens.
For subsistence, presumably.
Exactly. He told reporters, and this quote just says so much about the vulnerability. He said, "We have them because of the fear of not being able to eat. We wouldn't manage if everything were bought because the profit is very low." So this isn't just farming for profit. It's a constant battle for basic survival, even before this tariff slammed down.
And these personal stories like Jose's, they're absolutely crucial, aren't they? They help us understand the real gravity of these big geopolitical decisions. They show the human cost that can feel so abstract when you're just looking at economic models or hearing political speeches.
Yeah, it bridges that gap.
It really does. It highlights this immense vulnerability of individuals right at the start of these long global supply chains. These small-scale farmers, their whole existence, built over generations maybe, can just be upended by a single policy announcement, especially one that seems so politically motivated. And Jose's diversification, growing food for his family, raising chickens, it's not about maximizing profit. It's a defense mechanism against constant insecurity.
A safety net he had to build himself.
Precisely. So this isn't just some economic calculation being made far away. It's a profound disruption to actual lives, to communities, to a traditional way of farming that has supported families for ages.
And Jose's story, while incredibly powerful, isn't unique. There are so many others facing this. Take Paulo Vitor Meneses Freitas. He's a younger farmer, 31 years old, from Varese. He owns around 35,000 coffee trees, so a similar kind of scale to Jose. But for Paulo, the uncertainty hits even harder, if you can imagine that, because he and his wife are expecting their first child in October 2025.
Oh, wow. That adds another layer entirely.
Doesn't it? Just to think about that huge responsibility, the future of your family, providing for a new baby, and suddenly it feels like the ground is shaking beneath your feet because of a political decision made thousands of miles away. Paulo shared a quote that really captures this widespread fear, and it's pretty chilling to hear him say it. "It's scary. It feels like you're on shaky ground. If things get worse, what will we do?" And then he adds, "People will start pulling out their coffee and finding other ways to survive because they won't have the means to continue."
That's drastic. Pulling out coffee trees, that's abandoning decades of work.
It paints this really stark, terrifying picture, doesn't it? People seriously thinking about giving up their life's work, their heritage, because it just feels too unstable to go on. That is the real human face of this tariff policy. So keeping those personal stories, Jose's and Paulo's, in mind.
Let's zoom out again just a bit. Look at the wider economic picture. What does this 50% tariff actually mean for the coffee market itself?
Well, the basic economics are pretty straightforward, unfortunately.
Right. It's expected to just plummet Brazilian coffee's competitiveness in the U.S. market. It has to.
Exactly. Leandro Gilio, who's a professor of global agribusiness at Insper Business School in Sao Paulo, a respected voice on this, he put it very succinctly. He said this will naturally reduce demand.
Makes sense. Economics 101 almost.
Pretty much. When a product suddenly gets 50% more expensive because of an external factor like a tariff, buyers, especially big commercial buyers, are naturally going to look for cheaper alternatives, or they'll just buy less overall.
So effectively, Brazil's biggest customer is putting up a huge maybe don't buy sign on their coffee. That's a good way to put it. It's a massive disincentive.
And this isn't just a minor inconvenience for Brazil's coffee sector. This is potentially catastrophic because Brazil isn't just a coffee producer. It is, without question, the world's largest.
Long shot, yeah.
They export something like 85% of all the coffee they grow, a huge amount. And where does a big chunk of that exported coffee go?
To the U.S.
Exactly. The U.S. is Brazil's #1 coffee buyer. It accounts for around 16% of all their coffee exports. That figure comes from Cecafe, which is Brazil's Coffee Exporters Council. So just try and picture that. You're the world's biggest supplier of this crucial global commodity. And your single biggest customer, responsible for nearly a fifth of your international sales, suddenly slaps a 50% surcharge on your product.
It's a massive shock to the system.
It's not just a hiccup, is it? It's like an earthquake hitting their agricultural sector. It could cause deep, deep tremors.
And this situation perfectly illustrates what economists call market concentration risk.
Okay, explain that a bit.
Basically, it's the danger a seller faces when they rely too heavily on just one or maybe a very small number of buyers. If that one dominant buyer changes the rules, like imposing a massive tariff.
You're exposed.
Hugely exposed, especially when, as we discussed, the tariff seems politically motivated, not based on typical economic reasons. It creates immediate, severe economic instability. And Professor Gilio's comment on this is really critical. He said, there's no way we can quickly redirect our coffee production to other markets.
Why is that? Why can't they just sell it elsewhere?
Well, think about coffee, especially the Arabica type that Brazil is famous for. It takes years for a coffee plant to mature and produce beans, 3 to 5 years usually.
Right, it's a long-term investment.
Exactly. And then the trees produce for decades. You can't just decide overnight, oh, I'll plant something else this season. And finding new international buyers for hundreds of thousands of tons of coffee, that's incredibly difficult. Global supply chains, the big roasting companies, the retail agreements, they're often quite rigid, built up over years.
So switching isn't easy.
It's not just about finding someone who wants to buy it. It's logistics, it's different countries' import regulations, phytosanitary rules.
Sounds complex.
Very. And they might have to accept much lower prices in other less established markets. So yeah, a 50% tariff becomes this almost insurmountable barrier, practically overnight. It just magnifies the risk enormously for a country so dependent on that one big market.
And the fear, interestingly, it's not just contained within the coffee sector, is it?
No, the report suggests it's spreading.
This tariff, this aggressive political signal, it seems to have sparked broader anxiety across other major Brazilian export sectors, too. Sectors that also have strong ties to the U.S. market. Things like beef, orange juice.
Major industries for Brazil.
Absolutely. So you start thinking about the potential cascading effects, the knock-on impacts on the entire Brazilian economy, affecting millions of jobs well beyond the coffee farms.
It really shows how one targeted political action can potentially create systemic economic risk.
And there's another angle here, something that often gets missed when we talk about tariffs on exports. It's the indirect impact on what farmers need to buy their input costs.
Right, the cost of doing business for them.
Exactly. This tariff isn't just about the price they get for their exported coffee beans. It's also expected to hit the price of stuff they use every single day to run their farms. Things like machinery parts, maybe aluminum for processing equipment.
How does that work? How does an export tariff increase their input costs?
Well, think about it. If Brazilian exports take a massive hit because of the tariff, the overall economy is likely to slow down. That could lead to the Brazilian currency, the real, weakening against the U.S. dollar.
Okay, devaluation.
Right. And if the real is weaker, then imported goods like specialized farm machinery, maybe manufactured in the U.S. or Europe, or aluminum, which is traded globally, become significantly more expensive for Brazilian farmers to buy.
Ah, I see. So their costs go up.
Their costs go up. Plus, when an economy slows down, credit often gets tighter. So it becomes harder and more expensive for these farmers who are already struggling to get loans for essential equipment or improvements.
So it hits them from both sides, lower potential income from sales and higher costs for inputs and financing.
Exactly. It's like a double whammy, squeezing those already paper-thin profit margins even tighter. It's a really tough situation. But what's fascinating is the reaction within Brazil isn't uniform. While the immediate economic impact looks pretty devastating, and economists like Professor Gilio are sounding the alarm, there's this kind of surprising, almost defiant optimism coming from some industry figures.
Yeah, I saw that too, a real split in perspective.
Let's look at Márcio Ferreira. He's the president of the Deliberative Council of Cecafe. That's the main coffee exporters council in Brazil. He actually went public saying he believes the U.S. will keep importing Brazilian coffee, even with the tariff.
That's a bold claim, given the 50% rate.
It really is. His quote was striking. It's obvious that neither the United States nor any other source can give up on Brazil, even if it's tariffed. He's basically arguing Brazil is too big, too important, its coffee too essential or unique for the U.S. to just walk away. Indispensable, essentially.
Yeah, and this is where you see that real tension between sort of economic theory and market reality, or perhaps market belief.
Yeah.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, see Cafe's stance. Well, it might reflect the industry's historically strong position, the deep roots they have in the global market. There's maybe a logic in betting on what economists call the stickiness of supply chains.
Stickiness.
Yeah, meaning they're hard to change quickly. Think about the big U.S. coffee roasters. They've likely spent years, maybe decades, building relationships with Brazilian suppliers, setting up quality control, creating specific blends that rely on Brazilian beans.
Okay, so switching isn't just about finding a cheaper bean.
Exactly. It's about consistency, ensuring they get the massive volumes they need, the logistics are smooth, and maybe even preserving specific flavor profiles their customers expect. So Cecafe might be calculating that the cost and hassle of switching suppliers, even with a 50% tariff, might actually be higher for U.S. companies than just absorbing some of that tariff cost, at least for a while. That, and this is a big but, Professor Gilio's analysis, the one saying the tariff will likely decrease competitiveness and naturally reduce demand, that's grounded in fundamental economics.
Price matters.
Price matters, especially for commodities. In a price-sensitive market, significantly higher costs almost always lead to lower demand eventually. Buyers find alternative, or they pass the cost to consumers who might then buy less. So it raises this really important question. Is Cafe's optimism genuine? Do they truly believe Brazil is tariff-proof? Or is it maybe a strategic public relations move? Trying to calm nerves, project strength, keep the market from panicking, even if they know the underlying economics are grim for their members, the farmers like Jose and Paulo.
That's a possibility, isn't it? Managing perceptions.
It's a high-stakes game either way. And the farmers, they're the ones caught right in the middle of this uncertainty trying to figure out who to believe.
Yeah, one voice says indispensable, the other says demand will drop. It must be incredibly confusing and stressful for those farmers trying to plan their next harvest, their family's future. And as if the tariffs and this market whiplash weren't enough, we have to remember, these aren't the only storms these farmers are weathering.
Not by a long shot.
The tariff is just, in many ways, one more layer of brutal uncertainty piled on top of existing crises. We absolutely need to talk about the climate. These coffee producers are already fighting a battle against an increasingly dry and unpredictable climate. This isn't some future threat. It's happening now. It's an ongoing existential challenge for them.
Climate change is hitting agriculture hard, especially in vulnerable regions.
Exactly. And coffee is particularly sensitive. Just look at last year, 2024. There was a severe drought across large parts of Brazil, an event that climate scientists say was made significantly more likely by human-caused climate change. And it devastated huge areas of coffee production, including on Jose Naral da Silva's farm. Imagine watching your fields just wither.
Terrible. Less crop to sell.
Less crop to sell. But here's the really cruel twist, the painful irony. While that drought did cause global coffee prices to spike up because supply was down, it happened after many small farmers like Jose had already sold their harvest.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they often have to sell early, maybe to middlemen or under pre-agreed contracts, just to get cash flow to survive.
So they missed out on the higher prices caused by the very drought that ruined their crops.
Precisely. They didn't benefit at all. For many, it was a double hit. Lost crops and no upside from the market surge. It wasn't a silver lining, it was just another blow.
And that scenario, it really underscores this point about systemic vulnerability, doesn't it? Small producers operating on these incredibly thin margins, They get hit hardest by this convergence of environmental shocks and economic
They
volatility.
have no buffer.
Exactly. The tariff, as you said, it's just the latest punch. But it lands on people already reeling from climate change and unpredictable markets. They often lack the capital reserves to invest in things like climate resilience, maybe better irrigation systems, or drought-resistant plant varieties. They usually can't afford storage facilities that would let them hold on to their crops and wait for better prices.
So they're forced sellers, often.
Often, yes, it makes them profoundly vulnerable to any shock, whether it's a drought or a politically motivated tariff.
And just to pile on more instability, remember Paulo, the young farmer expecting his first child. He mentioned the price volatility even before the tariff hit. According to data from the University of Sao Paulo's Center for Advanced Studies in Applied Economics, Arabica coffee prices actually fell by a massive 33% between their peak in February 2025 and July 2025.
A third of the value wiped out in just a few months.
Yeah, not just a small dip, a huge plunge. And Paulo summed up what that feels like. You can just hear the desperation. When you make an investment, counting on a certain price for coffee, and then when you go to sell it, the price is 20–30% less than you calculated, it breaks the producers.
It completely undermines their planning, their ability to repay loans, everything.
It really does. So you see this picture emerging. These farmers constantly fighting on multiple fronts. The weather is getting more extreme and unpredictable. The global market prices swing wildly. And now, boom, a massive political tariff lands on top of it all. Talk about feeling like you're on shaky ground. So when you add it all up, the tariff shock, the climate pressures, the market volatility, who ends up bearing the brunt?
It's almost always the smallest players, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems heartbreakingly clear in this case. It's the small family farmer. These are the people, often unseen in the global chain, who actually produce more than 2/3 of all Brazilian coffee. Especially in regions like the northwestern part of Rio de Janeiro state, where we mentioned Varietai and Porciúncula. In places like that, coffee farming isn't just part of the economy, it is the main economic engine. You can picture the landscape, these gentle mountains covered in neat, symmetrical lines of coffee shrubs. It's a landscape shaped by generations of small, family-run farms. Each little plot represents decades, maybe even centuries, of family work and tradition.
That they really are the backbone of Brazilian coffee. They are. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, this whole crisis just throws the harsh realities of global commodity markets into sharp relief, especially for foundational crops like coffee. Professor Gilio made this point very clearly. The tariff principally affects small producers who have less financial power to make investments or support themselves in a period like this.
Less cushion to absorb the blow?
Exactly. These are the very people like Jose Natal da Silva who, as he told us so movingly, are already growing extra food crops and raising chickens, not as a side business, but out of a fundamental fear of not being able to eat. Because the profit from coffee alone is just very low.
That really says it all, doesn't it?
It does. It shows they operate without a real safety net, no significant financial buffer. This makes them exquisitely sensitive to any shock, economic or political. They often don't have easy access to bank loans or crop insurance or sophisticated market information that bigger players might have. They're just completely exposed.
So what does this really mean for you, the listener, maybe sipping that coffee right now?
It means the actual people who tend those coffee trees with care, the families running those small farms, they're the ones carrying the heaviest weight from this distant political fight. It's like a decision made in a government building thousands of miles away lands directly on their kitchen table, threatening their next meal, their ability to provide for their kids, their entire way of life.
It's a powerful reminder of how interconnected everything is. It truly is. And this relentless pressure, this deep uncertainty, it's leading to some really dire predictions, isn't it? Remember Paulo Vitor Menezes Freitas's fear? The chilling idea that people will start pulling out their coffee, finding other ways to survive because they won't have the means to continue.
Yeah, the potential for abandonment.
Think about the sheer scale of that, the cultural loss, the social upheaval, the economic devastation, if that happens widely. The entire landscape of Brazilian coffee, and maybe the global coffee market too, could be fundamentally, perhaps irreversibly, changed. Looking ahead then, what's the feeling? What's the future hold? It seems like a really volatile mix of maybe some desperate hope, but also just profound uncertainty hanging over these coffee regions.
Understandably so.
Paulo Vitor Menezes Freitas, the young farmer, he voiced that hope succinctly, didn't he? It felt like just a heartfelt plea for things to get back to normal. He said, "We hope this calms down. Hopefully they'll come to their senses and remove that tariff." And then he added, "I think it would be better for both the United States and Brazil."
A call for mutual benefit, for recognizing that interconnectedness.
Yeah, just a plea for sanity, really, in how countries deal with each other.
And that sentiment from Paulo, it raises a really critical question for all of us to think about, doesn't it? Beyond the immediate economic pain for these farmers, what are the bigger, longer-term consequences? What happens to global food security or maybe the diversity of our food supply? If politically motivated actions like this tariff end up driving small-scale producers out of business in key agricultural regions.
That's a huge question.
It is. If a significant number of these small family farms in Brazil, the bedrock of their coffee production, are forced to give up, what replaces them? You could see land consolidating into fewer, much larger industrial-scale farms. That might lead to less genetic diversity in coffee plants globally, making the entire supply potentially more vulnerable to diseases or future climate shocks.
Left resilience in the system.
Less resilience, exactly. And almost certainly it would mean a significant drop in Brazil's total coffee output that would ripple right through the global supply chain, inevitably affecting coffee prices and maybe even availability for consumers everywhere. So it's not just about one country's policy affecting its own farmers. It's about the future of a global commodity, the survival of traditional farming practices, and maybe even the stability of that morning ritual so many of us rely on.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? So the next time you're enjoying your morning coffee, savoring that flavor, maybe just take a moment to consider this incredibly intricate, often invisible web, this web of global politics, economic pressures, climate change, all influencing every single bean that ends up in your cup.
It's a complex journey from field to cup.
It really is. And it's a potent reminder, perhaps, that things that seem like distant political games or abstract trade disputes on the news, they can have very real, very direct impacts on our daily lives, maybe in ways we haven't even considered yet. Makes you wonder, how many other political decisions out there are quietly shaping your world profoundly without you even realizing it? Well, thank you for joining us today for this exploration into these complex forces shaping our world. We really hope you gain a deeper understanding of these intricate links between international politics, global economics, and the very real lives of ordinary people caught in the middle. Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. If you found this session insightful, learned something new, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. It really helps us out, and we genuinely want to hear your thoughts. What do you make of all this? Share your ideas in the comments section below. For more updates and discussions, you can also join us on social media. All the links you need are right there in the description. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and keep connecting the dots.